Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the witnesses being here, and good to see you, Mr. Horowitz, always. Your September 2016 audit highlighted widespread issues with the DEA's tracking and oversight of payments, the lack of receipts, a lack of information justifying payments to sources. These are issues that have been going on for a long time and were noted in I think, a 2005 report. Can you tell us how long these issues have been around and why they've been so persistent?
Well, it's clearly been, from our review, a long-term problem because we found analogous problems in our 2005 audit, and now we were seeing the same in 2015 and 16. Why it's occurring? It's, in the first instance, a system that isn't being implemented effectively. So, for example, mandatory fields that you're supposed to enter, an agent can just skip over them. There's no point at which, like when we all fill out forms online and it comes back and says, sorry, you can't go forward because this mandatory field needs to be filled in, there was no such stopgap with the DEA's file. So you had situations where sources were being input data, but key data like occupation wasn't being always entered. The system wasn't being accurately reported in terms of dollar payments, we found in many instances. And so these are systemic failures of the system. And then separately, we found that DEA hadn't put in place policies, procedures, or practices that allowed headquarters-based oversight such that they could watch for these issues, supervise these issues, and make sure change was occurring. It was being left to the field offices to handle these. And some field offices we found were doing a good job, and some field offices were doing something very different.
Well, you had some specific recommendations in your July 2015 report, and I think in your testimony you said the DEA had only implemented 5 of 7 of those. Is that, I mean, begs the question why the recommendations haven't been implemented yet, and does that in any way reflect a resistance on the part of the DEA? I mean, why haven't they implemented all of them?
I don't think it reflects a resistance to them, because certainly our communications have reflected an interest and willingness to do so. I think, frankly, these have happened, as I said in my opening statement, for such a long period of time, and you just mentioned as well. They will require, and we expect, not just paper policies, but we'll close recommendations when we see effective policies being actually implemented. So step 1 is a commitment to put the policies in place. Step 2 is, are they now being followed? Can we go in and look at them and say, yes, these are working, yes, these are being followed?
The reason I asked that about the resistance is that in Mr. Patterson's testimony, he said that all the recommendations had been implemented from that report, and your testimony indicates that 5 of 7 have been. So I'm just trying to determine.
I think that was just an error in terms of the terminology.
So as we put our testimony together, DEA has implemented those fixes. That doesn't mean that the IG has agreed with our implementation of those 2 being sufficient. So I apologize for that oversight. I did not mean to make the reference that they were closed by the OIG, but that, in fact, DEA had, and as I just explained to the Chairman on the FICA matter, the other matter is the 6-year review of the informants. There's still additional work that we can do on that. However, we're now in conformity with the AG guidelines in terms of those reviews.
I hope you can understand the frustration that some of us, and maybe most of us on the committee, feel, particularly in dealing with the DEA. It goes back to the issue of the sex parties in Colombia, and the fact that those agents, and I think many of our opinions, were not punished severely enough. In fact, I think, Mr. Horowitz, your report from March 2015 indicated that they received bonuses, which is in conflict with DEA policy. The chairman has brought up the bonus paid to the person who has responsibility for the aircraft. And it's just hard to understand how an organization can operate and violate its own policies and do things that create so much bad publicity toward the agency and not impose any discipline. So I think in regard to what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get the DEA in a position where they're functioning with proper oversight, where there's accountability and transparency in the agency, and really want to see the agency implement the recommendations of the OIG. I yield back.